Hey, what's up, everyone? Rip City Real Talk is back. Greg Moshkow, Anthony Blaylock here to talk about a rough week. We wanted to see some competition against some of the top teams, and instead we went to 1-8 against every West team ahead of us in the playoff standings. So not great. Got a lot of stuff we want to talk about today and touch on at least, and kind of dive right into it, man. Start off after that, 40-point win against the Thunder to going into the Clippers game and had some decent expectations that we play a little better against them. Not so much, eh?
We knew it was going to be a tough week. And on the pod last week, we said go 500. That was going to be difficult because it was only a 3-game stretch. So we were hoping to win 2 out of 3, right? And we were cautiously optimistic. I think we were realistic. I think a lot of these fans get a little too amped up about this stuff, and Blazers Edge becomes a total minefield, and Twitter can be a little painful too. But we'll talk about this week and what we hope to see going forward. I don't think all hope is completely lost. And I think you and I agree that there are some things that we can do to make tweaks to the lineup. So we'll go through it today. But I mean, I think people just need to calm down, bro.
Yeah, this is one of the first weeks I did not expect to go above 500. To be 100% honest with you, I kind of figured we could very well lose the 2 games, Clippers and the Jazz. I just wanted to see it be competitive. I wanted to see it come down to some final possessions, play good, and look like if you were to go into a playoff series against one of these 2 teams, that you at least could hold your ground in a series, get a couple, maybe steal one from home, whatever, keep it close. And it was disappointing to not see it be close.
Yeah. So we had the big blowout against the Thunder, and then we should have got some extra rest. Then we had a couple days off, and then we go to LA and we play the Clippers. And the Clippers were pretty much at full strength in that game, right? I mean, Kawhi, Paul George, they played everybody, and there was some takeaways from that game that I have, but I'll let you kind of recap it. What did you see in that Clipper game? What did you like and not like?
Again, perimeter defense being a problem. I've talked about it all year, and we've talked about the defense all year and how it affects his team, but Paul George got whatever he wanted. Kawhi Leonard, when he decided to drive, got whatever he wanted. It sets up everybody else on that team to come in and play good. I mean, for goodness sakes, Reggie Jackson came in and had one of his best games of the year. We get dominated by these smaller players. They're getting easy jump shots at the basket, easy foul line jumpers. I mean, we contested some of the threes, sure, and they were just happened to be hotter than us, and that's one thing. But at the same time, when you get behind like we did, and it was a record 47 points in a quarter.
Yeah.
You're not climbing out of that hole. That takes a lot of energy to climb out of the hole. They made it close at one point and then just couldn't stay with them and eventually lost. I think that was the game that we got down by 2 at one point, and then no, that was the Jazz. But either way, it was still.
We pulled within at least 4 to 6 in that game multiple times near halftime and in the third quarter. And both times, every time we got within about a 4-point stretch, they would just hit the gas. I agree with you. I mean, Paul George got whatever he wanted. So I wrote a couple things down here. I wrote down something just to remind myself. The 3-guard lineup was still good offensively. So I think people are wanting to kill that 3-guard lineup against a team with size. We'll talk about it today. I don't think that 3-guard lineup is a startable lineup, but it was still productive offensively. So I just don't think you're going to be able to outshoot teams as much as we want to. The other thing I wrote down is Paul George got whatever he wanted. And then the third little thing I wrote is that Covington did a pretty good job on Kawhi. I know Kawhi got 29 in that game, but if you watch in the second half, Covington had to guard him one-on-one, and Kawhi is one of the strongest guys in the league at backing you down, and he did not get the shots that he typically gets, and he didn't score with the efficiency that he normally would. So I thought Covington did a pretty good job of covering up some of the sins on defense there.
And he's been doing it all year. I mean, he's had to. It's what he's brought in here to do, and B, with some of the other issues that we have on defense and him really being the only guy, he's having to play a lot of that role, recover, help, do a lot of things that he was expected to do, but even more so lately, just because of how bad the defense has been, he's having to make up for a lot of stuff that he wouldn't normally have to make up for. And he's been doing a really good job of it. He's probably the only guy on the team that I trust to go one-on-one with somebody at this point, to try to slow them down at all.
Yeah, it was It was hard to watch. I mean, it didn't look like they were having any issues with us when they were scoring. Paul George just literally feasted. I mean, God, that guy was getting every shot he wanted, shooting over our guards. It looked like we couldn't even challenge him, to be honest with you. And then Dame is in a, I don't want to call it a slump because the poor guy, he carried us for the whole 25 games. CJ was out and 32 that Nurk missed and all that stuff. But the guy looks either tired, nicked up, gassed. I don't know. You say what you want, but Dame just looks a little fatigued right now. Do you agree with that? Or
Yeah, I don't know how much the knee is bothering him, and
yeah,
we're getting into the stretch where a lot of games are kind of within a couple games of each other. I mean, you're playing back to backs, you're playing a lot of one night off. So you got to imagine a guy with the offensive load that he has just getting fatigued for sure. It's been a problem for the Blazers every year. I mean, every year that he's been big. I mean, look at last year. I mean, they even had that big hiatus, but what he had to do in the bubble, the amount of energy that he had to expense, then go into the play-in tournament, then had to play against Memphis to get into the playoffs and have to continue to show out there and wore him down. And then you go against a big team like the Lakers, and we saw what happened. So it seems like every single year his body takes a beating. He's consistently, he was among the lead leaders in drawing fouls. It's been a little rough lately, and he's been making it known. And we'll talk about that. But
yeah.
either way, he does a lot of that. He goes in, he takes a lot of contact. He's not a flopper, so he's always pushing through aggressively. He's always looking to go attack the rim. And you take beatings, man. And then on top of that, you're having to consistently run the offense, move around, try to set guys up.
Mm-hmm.
It's got to get tiring on him.
Yeah,
He's
I
got to
think
get
so.
a little more beat up. So.
Yeah, and just with some of the stretch we've had, it's been a little tough. I know we're not playing long home stretches. We've been traveling a lot. There's all the excuses in the book, but I do think if we're gonna win a playoff series, we're gonna need Dame to kind of get healthy and get rested. Whatever's going on, he's gonna need to figure it out. The other thing I wrote down about this game, and we'll move on to the Jazz here in a little bit, but I want to talk about this Clippers game a little bit. We didn't rotate defensively at all. If you watch that game, we just tried to run ISO on whoever we could, and we don't really switch very much. Do you feel like we should, like Stotts should implement more switching, or do we just not have the personnel to do that?
I mean, it's tough when you have those two guards again because you do see some switching. I mean, you see guys having to move in and out, but I don't know. I don't know if we're not stop playing in zones or what it is, but I don't know as much of it's being on Stotts. Again, I mean, I've had a big discussion about this with some people recently, but Stotts is part of the issue. But the other issue is these guys they're not communicating well. They're not switching well. I feel like when Dame and CJ get put into a screen situation, it's causing them to have to follow guys in. You'll watch it a lot. I saw tons in the Clippers game where CJ was coming in behind George or somebody was coming in behind Kawhi. And that lets these guys, it puts Kanter in a terrible position because he's not a good defensive center. He has to drop back and try to protect the pass, or he has to come out and try to challenge, and guys are throwing it right behind him for easy lay-ins, and he's getting out of rebound position.
Yeah.
So with that being said, when you talk about switching, I mean, you want a guy to have to go recover. If Dame and CJ gets taken out of a play and all of a sudden their guy's going to start having some free reign, you'd love to see a guy like Norman Powell get over there and switch. But what's happening with this team is when these guys are doing that, they're leaving wide open shooters. So they're not switching, and the guards, when they get out of a play, if somebody goes to help them, they're not able to get back and cover and take away the guy that was being defended by the guy who's switching now to take over their assignment. It's been a problem all year. It's why we give up the most threes, one of the worst 3-point percentages in the league, because we are trying. I think they're trying to switch. They're just not effective as it. Maybe it's because they're having to do it on their own and they're not setting up certain zones and assignments. Part of it to me is just that you have two guys out there in the perimeter right now who just can't slow anybody down, and it forces issues.
Yeah, I feel like everybody else is trying to make up for that. And the other thing that you're seeing is when Kanter's in, he drops back, and then someone will drive. And when they drive, the help defender is not getting over there to help on the backside or whatever. And they're going right around Kanter and just scoring whenever they want. And I think some of that becomes a chess game of like, okay, well, I need to help in the back. So they back up, and then a shot goes right over the head. Right. And so I think that there's this perimeter versus inside defense, and we are just not communicating or linked in any way. We just feel we were getting some clutch possessions earlier on defensively in the season. I think some of those games where we were kind of eking it out a little bit against decent teams. not good teams, but decent teams. But we haven't had a lot of those recently. It's been kind of a struggle.
Yeah, yeah, it has. I mean, it's kind of going into the stretch. We saw a lot of these games where one quarter we were just unstoppable. I mean, the third quarter against Toronto, the really a couple teams had the fourth quarter just greatness. I mean, we were shutting guys down, getting all these great stops in the last couple of minutes, going down and hitting big shots. And that's where a lot of our wins have come from.
Mm-hmm.
But against these better teams, I mean, you start getting behind too fast early and giving them whatever they want. We're just, even with our 3-point ability, you're not able to get enough stops to come back and claw your way back into some of these games.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we'll get more into the defense. I want to talk more about that for sure, and the rotations and kind of what we're going to be able to do there, and start discussing that a little more, because it's going to be a problem against these big teams, these higher ranked teams. But before we do that, I want to move on to the Jazz. I want to kind of get these recaps out of the way, and then we'll break down the week as a whole.
Okay. So the Jazz game was kind of similar. Obviously, we didn't dig ourselves as big of a hole because I don't think they're quite as good as shooters from. I mean, they're good shooters from the perimeter, but we defended them better from the perimeter. We were still kind of close at halftime. I think we were leading at halftime. Actually, were we by 2?
It was either that or we were down by 1.
Yeah, it was close. It was really close at halftime, and then in the second half, the third quarter specifically, we came out a little bit flat. When we came out flat, that's a normal Stotts thing with this team. We come out flat. And I don't know if it's the players, the second lineup, whoever comes out, whatever. But we always come out flat in the third quarter. And then it was 68-68. And the part of the game that felt like to me where we lost that game was Nurk got into foul trouble. He comes out of the game, and then we just got absolutely shredded once he was out. And that's not abnormal. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's been a problem. It's been a problem with Nurk's health, because he really is a good defender down low. Yeah. He's not going to get out there and do much in the perimeter, but he tries. I mean, we've seen, what do they call it, rogue Nurk, where he's getting out and doubling and helping him. You know, and it's great because at least he's reacting, and that's what I talk about with personnel and players out there playing defense versus the coaching schemes. Is you have to have guys that can recognize and read that stuff and be able to react to it. And to get yourself in a position, especially down low. Nurk is so good at reading where guys are going to come, when to help, when they go up and try to time a block. He makes it tough on guys down there to want to drive in on him, whereas Kanter just doesn't have that skill set at all. And so, yeah, man, it's like when you see Nurk go out, it's all of a sudden it just – and there's a reason we've, been so bad defensively throughout most of the year. It's because, again, we haven't had Nurk for most of the year. I don't know. I just think when you have two guards that can't defend and you have a center who can't defend, talking about Kanter, that's the two primary spots that you just don't have any. You can't stop them at the point of attack. The drive and your center can't do anything. And it doesn't matter how good Jones or Powell or Rocco are, you're not going to be able to stop people. So having Nurk in there and being able to do that, when you see that, we tend to have better defensive standings. We stay closer in these games because teams – now you've taken away what they can do inside. They're forcing them back on the outside, and that lets our wings kind of defend a little easier and more naturally and be able to react a little better to help out for Dame and CJ. And really, we slowed down Gobert. We slowed down all of them until you're absolutely right, until Nurk came out, and then it seemed like they got whatever they wanted. And that's just a team that you can't let up on because their bench is so good. Their starters are so good that they don't have a weak point in a game where they're going to go on a lull. It's one of the reasons they have the best record in the league. They're going to consistently have guys out there to stop runs or go on runs, and
I
don't know.
And we responded. I thought we came out at the start of the game and we went punch for punch with them, right? We looked really good, and they're one of the best defending teams in the league, and I still thought we got decent looks, right? There was nothing wrong with our offense in that game. The problem is the second half, the defense just allowed the floodgates to open at some point. And against really good teams, that's been what's happened this year. We gave up 133 to the Clippers. Nobody's going to win a game giving up 133 points unless it's in an overtime game. I'm so sorry. And the other thing that you got to look at here is I agree with you when you say it doesn't matter how good Robert Covington, Derek Jones, and Norman Powell are defending on the wing. If our guards and our center are just going to allow whatever they want from the perimeter and not make people uncomfortable, it doesn't matter. The ball is going to get rotated to an open shooter on every single team that's in the playoff hunt in either conference. It doesn't matter which conference you're in. They're going to find shooters. And we have to do something to make those teams uncomfortable. I just don't know what it is.
and that's been a big topic amongst fans. And you
Mhm.
know, again, once we kind of touch on this Detroit game, we'll get into that. But I
Yeah.
agreed, man. Like, there's got to be something that's got to give. I don't like the small guard lineup. I don't like putting Powell out there. I've been pretty vocal about it. I'd rather have Jones out there playing defense just to add length, to be able to try to make up some ground, recover from some of these drives, and that ball does get kicked out, to make guys have to make another pass or what have you. Um, you can't let teams shoot like they're shooting. I mean, it's especially dangerous in the 3-point game, because that's what we do. We're a 3-point shooting team, and that's how we pull away. That is how we stay in games. In order to do that, you know, you're going to have to stop other teams from hitting the three as well. I mean, I know Milwaukee was kind of an exception to that rule, because most
Yeah.
of their damage is done inside, and that's what happens when you have Giannis. Like,
Yeah.
that's Giannis's game. So
Mhm.
that's an exception. But for the most part, these teams that don't normally shoot that well from three, or guys who don't normally shoot that well from three, we're just giving wide open looks and allowing them to get into the game. And when you have those other role players doing good, it forces you out of what you want to do defensively, and it forces the other team's stars just to do what they do. I mean, we saw how many easy jumpers that Donovan Mitchell got, because again, his defensive assignment gets taken out of the play on the screen. By the time the help can get there, he's got a wide open little bubble to shoot from the mid range. He's knocking them down. It's consistent all year.
Yeah, and he was nasty in that game, man. He was tough. And the thing about him is if you give him an inch, he'll take a mile. I mean, he does not need a ton of room to make his shot happen. And he looked really good. I think I think Gobert's a problem, but it looked like to me Nurk handled him in that game pretty well. If Nurk can get healthy, and that's what I texted you. I think I texted you after that game and said if Nurkic is
You did.
healthy and plays 30 minutes and doesn't get into foul trouble, which he always does, but if he doesn't get into foul trouble, like we compete with the Jazz that whole game. I have no qualms about that. But when he gets into foul trouble or if he gets dinged up, then it's going to be a problem, man, because this lineup can't hang with that.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's not untrue. Cantor's not a defensive center. He wasn't brought
Nope.
in here to be a defensive
No,
center. He was brought
no.
in here to be a backup rebounder,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and to give you some offense in the post game and things like that. Now he's had to play a bigger role, but it's not his. I mean, it's part his fault, because he's not a defensive guy and he has to be
Yeah.
better on that side of the floor, give a little more effort than he does, and really just try to learn and react and get better as the season goes. And I haven't seen it from him, but it doesn't make a difference.
But then
When
in
Nurk's
the
out there,
then in the
go ahead.
Pistons game, he gets 30 rebounds and everybody thinks he's like the man. That's what he's here for. He's here for cleaning up the glass and giving very good footwork in the post and having a bevy of post scoring that he can do. I mean,
Yeah.
Cantor just brings it in a different way. I think if we had a different team, Cantor would be a fine center to use for 25 to 30 minutes. We just don't have a lineup that can surround him and help him enough to cover up his weaknesses, right?
Yeah, I mean, rebounding and post scoring and all that fun stuff. He's got some of the best footwork in the league from a big man. I mean, he's able to do things against some of the better defenders and still get his shot off.
Yeah.
That's great. But our problem is an offense. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, I don't need that from my starting center. I mean, it's great if you can get 10, 12 points from a guy in the center position, sure, but I need somebody. We need somebody on this team,
Yeah.
like a Nurk, who's going to make people think twice about going into the middle, and who can react and stop some of these attacks that are just being way too easy for people right now.
Yeah. And I didn't get to catch a lot of this Detroit game last night. So what did you see in that game? And what did I heard you text me about DJ, said he was actually looking really good in that game.
You know, yeah, it's funny because we've talked about in the podcast about his effort and his passion, especially his passion. We said it was the same thing with Mo for a long time. It's like Mo had all these good defensive tools from a wing position, but he just gets taken out of games, like emotionally. Like, you don't see these big splash plays.
Yeah.
I don't see the hustle. Like, it's not a matter of a guy giving effort as much as it is just like hustling. And I think when Stotts called him out, because Stotts called him out in that post-game interview about how his defense specifically lately hasn't been up to par.
Sure.
People wanted to eat Stotts and tear him apart for it. But again, I mean, if you watch the games and you watch him specifically, yeah, he does some things every once in a while. But what I saw, especially last night, I mean, he went up and had probably one of the best blocks of the year. I mean, it was fun. He flew up and just knocked it out of there. I saw him get a couple other deflections. I saw him get some steals. These are the things that I need to see. And it wasn't just that he was getting these, it's that he was flying around doing it. It was that he was moving around with a sense of urgency, trying to recover from, a lot of these, again, our guards' terrible defense. The guys get in, they kick out. What happens what I'm seeing is with him and Rocco is when these guards are getting around their guy, then all of a sudden these two guys have to come in and try to help because Cantor, like you said, has to drop back because you can't give another, an alley-oop or something easy down low, and he's got to be able to rebound. So he's forced to drop back, and that brings Jones and Rocco in. It sucks them in like a vortex, and that's where you're seeing a lot of the kickouts and all of the open threes. And I haven't seen enough of Jones pushing back out on that shooter, not with a sense of urgency. I saw it a lot more last night. I saw him hustling up and down the court to make those types of plays on the defensive side of things, and that is what I need to see more of. And that's why I want him back in the starting unit, because I think he can do it. He just has to give it 100% every night. And I think, I don't know what the problem is or why he doesn't. I think sometimes you don't get involved in the offense as much. You a lot of these guys just their mind's not fully in the game. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
When you're not being utilized at your end.
Derek Jones is a rhythm guy. I think he needs 20 minutes, 25 minutes, and I think he plays better with the starters. I agree with you on the Mo Harkless point. He reminds me of Mo. He has plays that are unbelievably splashy, right? And he can dunk it and he can do all these fun, flashy things, but he misses on some of the more basic plays. The other thing about Derek is his three-point shooting at times has been really like either not there or he misses. Like sometimes he just doesn't shoot that much. So I agree with you, and I think you talk about him replacing Norm in the starting unit. But something just popped into my mind, and I was thinking about this while you were going through that point. We think that Derek Jones would play better with the starters, and I think him and Covington are a perfect pair in the front court for small forward, power forward. But here's what I think. What if we moved CJ to the second unit? So here's the deal. So it goes Dame, Norm Powell, Derek Jones, and Covington, because they're the best lineups you're going to play against are going to be the most offensively minded lineups. And the reason you also move CJ to the bench is he can play with Melo more, and the two of them can be the primary scorers in the backup unit. So you only have one bad defender in the starting lineup if Nurkic is healthy, but then if you need to play Cantor, you need to do that kind of thing, you can play him. Dame and CJ being out there for 30 plus minutes a game together is really hurting us defensively. I think you got to find a way to stagger that more.
Yeah. So my only issue with that is it doesn't help your defensive unit at all on the bench. I mean, it makes it worse. At least with Jones or Powell, one of the two, we'll discuss lineups here. At least with one of the two out there, you have somebody that can hopefully slow down the point of attack, because Melo's useless on defense. I mean, all the respect in the world to Nasir Little. He's getting better and better with every game, and I really think we're going to see a good surge from him going into the playoffs as he starts to earn a normal role. But he's still raw. He's still having to recover. He's still learning where to be. He hasn't had these minutes most of the year. He's been either hurt or just they haven't used him because we had Hood. Yep. So he's still figuring things out. Okay, here's the other side of this. You're not benching CJ. Nobody does it in the NBA. You're not benching your $30 million shooting guard. You do not put him down because, here's the other side of that. Here's the other thing that kind of rolls around with that is he already plays a lot with the second unit. Because when he goes out in the first quarter and takes his rest and Dame plays the whole quarter, CJ is the one that comes back in the second quarter and plays with those guys before he gets his rest, and then they both come in to finish the quarters. So he's already out there playing point guard with Melo, with Cantor, and we haven't seen any – there's nothing there to prove that that's any kind of an improvement.
Well,
I get what you're saying.
What about so here's something else I wrote down. So since the Norman Powell trade and CJ got healthy, which happened really similar timing, right? Like CJ came back, and then we traded for Norman Powell. Since the two of them started playing, their scoring and shots are up, right? But Dame's scoring is now suppressed. So Dame isn't scoring as much because CJ, in my opinion, he doesn't have to as much. He doesn't have to do as much offensively because CJ and Norm are actually carrying more of an offensive load. Is that a good thing?
It's not a bad thing. I mean, you want Powell to be, if he's going to start, you want him to feel comfortable and you have to get him involved. We've also seen Dame's assist numbers slowly go back up.
Yep.
CJ, again, and I don't know how much of this has to do with Dame being a little bit banged up or what the case is, but CJ's, always been his scoring mate. He was up to 26 points a game before the injury. So trade or no trade, I don't know about that. I don't know how much that affects Dame, but I would say Norman Powell definitely affects it because if you look at what Jones was being asked to do in the offense and where his
Yep.
scoring was, I mean, all of the scoring went through Dame and CJ, and now Powell's getting 12, 15 points a game, a little bit more, or less than he was getting in Toronto, but he's able to get more looks for himself. He's able to score off the dribble more instead of just sit in the corner and shoot threes, which is fine because he's 50% for doing so, but he does give you another guy who can attack, and I think that has to take away from Dame. It's not a bad thing.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter who's scoring the ball. I mean, as long as we're getting points, that Dame and CJ can score. That Dame can turn it on at any point, and he needs to continue to do it in the end of games, and he can. I don't think it matters if he's not putting up the same point totals or the same amount of shots throughout the game. Still going in his hands at the end,
So maybe we should look for something. Okay, so both of these two games, the Clippers and the Jazz, we lost those games in the third quarters. I mean, and it was kind of close, I guess, with the Clippers. It went back and forth, but we got blown out. So maybe something that we should be watching as the season starts to wind down is not so much the starters, but maybe the closers. Like maybe we should watch in the fourth quarter and see what our best defensive lineup is and what Stotts tends to do, because we know it's not Melo Cantor. And if Nurk gets into foul trouble, we're gonna have a big trouble in whatever game it may be. But I think watching the closers over the next month we might learn more from that than the starters even.
Yeah, but the closers lately have really been the starters. I mean, Cantor, they kind of flip back and forth between Cantor and Melo, I think, depending on what the needs are, whether it's shooting or if they're just trying to get rebounds. But Powell's already established. CJ and Dame are going to be your two, and Rocco. I mean, those four are out there no matter what. And I think more often than not, it's going to be between Nurk and Cantor. When Nurk is healthy, you expect him to be out there.
Mm-hmm.
So, I just think the bench needs to be addressed, man. I kind of want to move on to that. I want to talk about the bench because to me, that's outside of the defense of this team, the bench has been our biggest issue and our biggest concern by far. We are not getting production out of there. We're getting maybe 20 points, 25 points a game from our bench right now. That's rough, man. That's tough.
Yeah, and so I checked on the Pistons game. Now, I don't know if this is matchup dependent. I don't know why this happened, but Nasir Little did play 24 minutes against the Pistons, so he played more minutes than Melo's 19. I think 18, 19 minutes for Melo is fine. I'm fine with that. Anything over 20, we're trending into dangerous territory. Melo got 11. Nasir got 11. Cantor was 30 rebounds, like we said earlier. That's amazing. I think Nasir Little is the biggest key to the backup unit. And what I mean by that is if he's looking good on hustle plays, he's making his shots, and we feel comfortable and confident with Nasir, I think he can help he can be CJ's running mate in that second unit, right? The other thing is when you look at it, the other thing you talk about with Derek Jones, I don't want him in the second unit because the second unit struggles to score, and Derek Jones doesn't help with that. So it feels like to me, you're talking about Powell in the second unit. That would make a whole lot more sense to me. I agree with you. We gotta tweak this up a little bit.
Yeah, I wish that he would go back to Powell in the second unit and play the Gary Trent role because he's not just a shooter. I mean, he's really good at shooting the ball, and that's great. But the fact that he can drive and attack in different ways.
Transition, too. He was getting out, running it.
Yeah, and he's a great fast break guy.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just think the bench needs more scoring. Nasir has been playing great. You talk about the minutes, and it makes sense. I mean, a lot of it did because, we kind of closed it out, and it was relatively close game. But the starters still played a lot of minutes, more than they probably should have. Dame didn't sit until about 2 minutes left in the game, which is a problem.
I was going to say, Dame played 34. CJ played 31. Cantor played 37. He's not a starter. And then Nurk was sitting in this game, yeah?
Yeah, he's playing tonight.
Rondé Hollis-Jefferson, 7 minutes. Let's go.
And that's the thing I want to talk about, too, because I loved it. I loved every single thing I saw about him except for he's not going to score. He's definitely not a shooter. There's a couple times where he lined up in the corner. I don't know how much of that is stats or how much of that is just you're new, and that's the easiest thing for you to pay attention to do on offense. When you're integrating a guy, it's like, hey, go stand there. If you're open, we'll try to get it to you. Do your best. Instead of having to worry about making the right cuts and screens. Who knows? I'm not sure what's going on with that. I didn't like it. Dude's got the ugliest jumper in the world.
Yeah.
But defensively, oh my gosh, man, I wish you would have got to see more of the game because he was out on guys. He was attacking at the half court.
Yeah.
He was jumping around, hands up. He was forcing a lot of passes. He played center. he went down and was guarding the other team's center. It was like he did literally everything that we've seen like a guy like Rocco do. And I'm sorry, I'm ready for him to replace Carmelo. If we can get another guy to score on that bench, because that's the other problem is Melo's been our scoring threat on the bench, but he's been terrible lately. He's been absolutely garbage. And so, and I don't know, again, we talked about this before we got on the pod. I don't know how much of that is age or, maybe you get in your own head when you start to miss these kind of shots and you're trying to force up bad ones. I don't know. He made a couple threes. He actually didn't do too bad this last game. His efficiency was all right. But that's his roles to score. And if you can get somebody back down to the score, I'm totally fine. If Nas can start driving like he's been doing and attacking the rim and bodying guys out of the way and hitting the jumper at the rate he's hitting the jumper right now, by Melo, I will put Hollis Jefferson out there at any point. If you watched him last night, you watched the hustle. The things that I talk about with Derek Jones that I want to see more out of with your athletic ability, that's what I'm seeing Rondae Hollis Jefferson doing right now is just getting in guys' faces and closing out, running around, making a mess of like the offensive plans.
Making a mess. Maybe him and Norman Powell can bring some of the energy and different schemes that they brought up in Toronto, and they can sort of inspire this team to play better defense because they ran some nasty sets up there in Toronto. And the other thing is Norman Powell talked about, we'd throw different looks at teams. We'd come out and at halftime, we'd make adjustments. I have never been a Fire Stotts guy, but we got to see some adjustments here defensively. I texted you after this last game or the Jazz game, and I said, we can't just play drop the big, drop the big, drop the big. Like the rogue Nurk stuff, I don't even care if we play Hollis Jefferson at the 5. I don't even care if you play Rocco at the 5, but you cannot just put Kanter out there and play him with Melo and then drop him back and let these teams score on us at will. It has to stop, or else it is going to cost Stotts his job because the dude's going to get fired if we have another one. Either we're a play-in team and we miss out, or if we go one and done.
This is the first year in a while that I really can see them getting rid of Stotts. Just the post-game stuff, the defense has been historically bad, and again, I don't think that's all on him. In fact, I don't think it's mostly on him. I still think it's mostly on the personnel and the players. But you're right, he definitely is a part of that. You have to acknowledge that your guards can't stop anybody and that your center is an issue, and you have to find ways and get creative with ways to help them, whether you're throwing a bunch of doubles out at the other team's best player. And we've seen him do that.
Yes.
We've seen him do that. Last year, he did that against Harden. And Harden had one of his worst games as a Rocket in like the last 5 years. Maybe not, I'm exaggerating, but the point is we've seen him do different things like that. He doesn't do it enough. Part of that's because I don't think he trusts the personnel to be able to do it. I think that's why he's calling out Jones and guys like that. And part of it is they just can't do it. You can't. Maybe we don't know. We have no idea. We have no idea if he's been trying different things and different sets, and it's just not working. So they have to go back to what these guys' best skill sets are and trying to utilize it.
I think we've talked about this before. We don't really have a personnel that's going to be amazing defensively unless you roll out some lineup that doesn't include CJ in it. Like I've talked about, I just said, if you want to bench CJ and you want to start Derek Jones, Norman Powell, and Rocco with Nurk and Dame, that'd be a great defensive lineup. But guess what? You're going to be really limited offensively, and you run the risk of Paul George getting hot and dropping 40 in the first quarter and you not being good enough defensively to slow that down. And then you've dug yourself into that hole. So I don't know, man. I try to give Stotts the benefit of the doubt. I just want to see some different schemes, and I want to see him try some different stuff. And if it means playing Nasir Little or playing Rondae Hollis Jefferson over Melo in the Melo minutes, you have to do that. The Melo legacy thing, like the Melo legacy 20 minutes and 12 shots a game, that can't happen anymore, man. Like if he's cold, you got to pull him after 5 minutes. You just got it.
I'm going to come out and say it now. I told you before we got on here. I think he's done after this year. I know that there's aspirations, and I think to start the year, I think he really wanted to play more, but there's a look in his face right now. There's a look in his eyes when, if he misses a shot or he gets beat defensively. I don't see fire anymore. You watch when he gets close up, I just don't see the fire. I don't see him communicating as well with teammates. I mean, he's still making good passes and he's still out there playing. It's his job, but I think the love of the game, it probably still there, but I think he's realizing very slowly as the season goes on, especially that he doesn't have it anymore. He can't do what he wants to do. When you see, maybe it's just a slump. Maybe it really is. I mean, when you see him missing shots, I feel like his head's down. He's not as excited about it. I just don't see him coming back. I think this is it.
Okay.
And when you have a guy that's in that mentality already and he's not shooting well, and that's your primary form of offense, I 100% agree with you. I'm all for giving all of his minutes to Nas. You know what? Give his minutes to Rondae for at least the defensive side of it.
Sure.
See what Nas can do. Play around with it for a while. It's tough because you're in the final third of the season. You're a playoff team, and you don't want to mess with that stuff too much right now. And that's another thing that a lot of fans don't seem to understand when I'm talking about the whole fire Stotts thing. It's like they want it done now. It's like you're not firing your coach in the final third of a season when you're the sixth, potentially fifth seed. Get out of here with that. But at the same time, you're absolutely right. He has to look into this roster and he has to start playing around with some stuff because you can't keep going to a guy like Melo. You're going to get beat in the playoffs. You don't have bench scoring. And then at this point, again, for the first time in a long time, I can see Stotts getting the axe. And it really depends on a lot of it has to depend on Dame. It really does. I mean,
Dame's going to have
that's another thing that people, the fire Stotts people don't seem to understand is at the end of the day, Neil's going to make Dame happy. He's your guy. And Dame has come out in the past. He's stuck up for Stotts. He said it's all the players' fault, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. He's a big Stotts guy. He's the only coach he's had. And so there's part of that there. But I think even this year, I can honestly see even this year a different vibe in Dame. We saw some of the interviews at the end of the Utah game where he doesn't look as optimistic as he was. And I think you're starting to come to a crossroads with the players and Stotts and the accountability to where this could be the final year at Stotts as a Blazers coach.
I think here's the other thing, though. Whenever in the NFL a fan base starts clamoring to fire someone, I say, who do you want to replace him with ideally? Yeah. So if you, okay, fine, you want to fire Stotts, I totally understand that, and I'm fine with that at this point. If at the end of the year we're a one and done and we lose to the Jazz or the Clippers or Phoenix.
Probably.
Yeah, Clippers. Let's say we get a 4-1 by the Clippers and you want to fire Stotts, fine. Who do you want to replace him with? Who's out there that you love? Because Stan Van Gundy has been brutally terrible this year. I'm sorry to tell you, he's a bad coach. Like, I mean, Doc Rivers has been great for Philadelphia. He's literally turned the key on them defensively, but health is still an issue for Embiid. So it's not like he's going to like walk into the title this year. And Steve Nash is kind of a weird deal. I don't know, man. I always try to say, who do you want us to replace Stotts with? And I think that's what the Fire Stotts crowd needs to come up with next, man, because I don't know who they want. Tibbs?
They want a defensive coach. I mean, everything is said. It's like, okay, that's easy to say. I mean, let's go. We want a defensive coach.
Yeah, David Vanterpool. Okay, he has no head coaching experience. You know.
Yeah, and it's not just about being a good defensive coach. You also have to be able to coach offense and set guys up in sets. Yesterday when I was having some conversations with people, they kept throwing teams at me. Well, Orlando's a top 10 defensive team before they blew. Great, look at Orlando's record. I don't care who you are. You have a 2-time All-Star. You have Aaron Gordon, who's apparently the bee's knees with everybody. You had guys, and you can't score. Mm-hmm. That's great. I mean, you look at some of these other teams that have a high defensive rating, and you look at their records. It's like somebody told me about Golden State. Cool. They still have a healthy Draymond Green and they still have a healthy Curry. Without Klay Thompson's defense on there and his shooting ability, they're still a bad team right now. Their record is bad. Yep. You can only do so much with a defensive coach. You also have to be able to come up with offensive plays. And Stotts is an offensive guru. That's one of the reasons we're at the point we are this year anyway. Yeah. With as bad of a defense as we are, you're still looking at potentially being the 5th seed. And honestly, the best start in the Damian Lillard era since he took over from LaMarcus. Mm-hmm. People, you got to look at those different things, and I'm fine with getting a defensive coach. I really am. I don't think it helps. I mean, it'll improve, sure, because you'll be more creative and you can throw different looks at teams all day. That's great. But as long as CJ and Dame are you two guards, they're 6'3" and they have no defensive ability.
Yeah.
Again, I don't care what roster you have out there. I don't care what coach is out there. It's going to continue to be a problem, and you can get the best defensive coach in the world, and you're still going to be a bottom half defense in this league because of the point of attack. You just can't slow anybody down, and you don't have the size to get in the way. So
I'm with
fine, but I agree with you. Nobody's able to come to me and say, I think this would be a good replacement coach. And basketball is weird anyway because a lot of it ends up being assistant coaches.
Yes.
People that nobody really knows the names of. It's not like the NFL where you know what top defensive coordinator and you know who the top offensive minds are, and like they're the candidates for the next season. You can kind of already get an idea halfway through the season who's going to be a coaching candidate, whereas the NBA is a little different with that. It's a little tougher to gauge. I don't know. I mean, people can't give me examples of what they thought should be doing differently. You can say all day, "Oh, the schemes he's running is great." Okay, well, then tell me what you would do different. Obviously, these people are all expert coaches, and they know that he's so bad because you can see what he's doing out there. So, how is a defensive guy going to come in here and change that? And I agree with you 100%. There hasn't been a good enough replacement listed for a guy that's had a winning record in Portland, gone to the Western Conference Finals,
Second longest
with one
tenured coach in the
All-Star.
league.
With
Yeah.
one All-Star.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, okay, so we don't have to talk about the stats thing anymore after this. But the other thing is fans have no control. It's going to be up to Jody Allen and Neil O'Shea what they want to do. And I agree with you that Dame is going to get a big portion of that decision, right? If Neil O'Shea says, okay, there's pressure on me, I got to talk to Dame. They're not going to fire him if Dame says don't do it. But I do think Dame is starting to swing around a little bit on the okay, my window's starting to close. And I think that could also, we don't have to talk trade CJ. We'll figure that out in the offseason too.
Right.
But we still have the horses on this team to make a first round playoff run. I'm not saying win the championship, and I'm not saying make the Western Conference Finals, but there's no excuses for us when we get into the playoffs and get Nurkic and CJ really fully integrated, and Nurkic is actually healthy. There's no reason that we couldn't contend for 7 games with the Clippers. And for us to have a couple losses this week and for fans to just freak out and start screaming that we're mediocre and all that stuff, we're still in 6th place. We're still competing with good teams until the middle of the third quarter, and then something swings the wrong way. Also, we haven't played that many teams that are over 500 yet. So why don't we just wait till the end of the season before we just denounce the entire team and call them all bums? I'm fine with criticism, but it has to be healthy criticism, not just throwing your hands in the air and saying I quit on this team.
Yeah. So here's a fun little tidbit for you. So against the Nuggets in 2019, the Blazers lost the series 3-1 through the regular season. Against Oklahoma City, guess how many games we beat them in the regular season? 0. 0-4. We went 1-7 against the 2 teams that we beat in that playoff series.
Yes. That's what
they were not pretty games. They weren't pretty games. I mean, they were competitive-ish, but for the most part, we got whooped. And then we go in there and you beat Oklahoma City in 5, and then you go in there and you beat the Nuggets, who probably at that point roster-wise were definitely better than us in 7.
Definitely.
Regular season doesn't mean that much. I mean, it does because it gives you a gauge.
Yes.
But how many teams do we see in the regular season be absolutely dominant of the Milwaukee Bucks of the world? And then when it comes to playoffs, the other teams sneak in there and make you look silly.
Well, last year, the Clippers were favored to dominate Denver. They got up 3-1, and then Denver came back and won this series because they're a cohesive team with a good coach that has been to the playoffs before, and they knew what to do. They didn't panic. And I think that's the thing about Portland is you have to understand, once Dame gets into the playoffs, he knows he's going to get trapped. Nurkic has played a lot of playoff minutes now. CJ knows what to do. I mean, CJ was really – I understand people hate CJ and they get really tired of it, but come playoff time, he's going to be absolutely essential for this team. And Norm Powell has a championship ring. So I'm really not as concerned as other people are. I'll take our chances in a coin flip if it's against the Clippers or Phoenix. Obviously, I don't want to draw Utah, and we're not going to have home court, but I don't really care, man. I'll take our chances. I don't mind.
Yeah. Again, last year with the whole hiatus, the bubble, the amount of energy that they had to put in such a small stretch of time, and then you draw the Lakers in the first round. That whole freaking thing could just be written off. So then you go back to the year before, and you just went to the Western Conference Finals. Yeah. I agree with you 100%. I think if you get into playoffs, I don't think we're a championship caliber team.
No.
And that's only because of how stacked Utah is. Denver's chemistry, and then the Lakers are probably still going to steamroll everybody and go right back to the championship game with a healthy LeBron and AD. They were tops in the league before the injuries for a reason. It don't matter. I mean, good luck slowing them down regardless. I mean, it's Golden State all over again. I don't care what team's hot going into play. You're going to run into them. They're probably still going to be the top, championship caliber team in the West. But I do think it'll be competitive. I do think it can be more fun than people think. I think the Clippers, outside of Kawhi and George, don't have a lot to help them. Yeah. Those two just get hot and they throw everything off, and that's fine. Yeah. You'll figure out ways to slow that down as you get into a playoff series with them.
They're not going to score that well. If Paul George has an off game, they're not going to score 133 consistently.
No, and defense has to be better regardless. But you're absolutely right, and so that's the other side of things that people do freak out about these losses, and it's not good. I mean, you are 1-8 against every team ahead of you. I get that,
The most
but
egregious thing, I read this thing on Blazers Edge the other day. This guy says, "Oh, I wish we had a team that was like the Thunder right now and we had 28 picks." And I was like, you want to be the Thunder right now. That's what you want. You want to trade Dame and CJ for 20 picks over the next 5 years. No, thank you. I will take playoffs. I would rather our a puncher. Like, that is the most egregious thing I have ever heard. The Thunder are terrible, and Shai Gilgeous is fun, and Lou Dort is fun, but they are not going to be in the playoffs for years. And even if they do, I mean, if you look at like the Philadelphia team, that was the process. Yeah, the process was great and it got them back to where the Blazers have been for 8 years now. Like, I'm good. You guys can keep all your picks. I'll keep Damon CJ and I'll keep Stotts and we'll just make the playoffs and hopefully we'll make. I mean, like, it's just crazy the overreactions you hear when we lose a couple games to good teams, man.
yeah, it is. There's obviously a lot of season left. It's going to be a rough stretch. I I do think we're going to end up sticking at the 6th seed. I don't
Mm-hmm.
think we'll lose enough for the Mavericks to catch us.
Yeah.
Because we have the tiebreaker on them, and I still think there's enough teams that we can beat to hold out. It's a little sketchy, but I think it can be done. So then you're playing probably the Clippers, maybe Denver at this point. They're
Maybe.
sneaking in there.
I'd be okay
Um,
with that.
I'm not mad at Denver either. We've already beat them in a playoff series. We play them
Mm-hmm.
enough to where we know their personnel. We match up well against their guards. So
Okay, so just real quick, upcoming this week. So today is Sunday. We're recording in the afternoon. So we play the Heat tonight, which I feel
yep.
fine about. We play the Celtics on Tuesday, and then the Spurs on Friday. So the next time we talk to you fans, which we love you. We will have played the Heat, Celtics, and Spurs. If we go 2-1, 3-0, I don't think anybody's freaking out next Sunday, right? And we will still be in the 6th seed if we do that.
Yeah, it's gonna be rougher than you think. I mean, Miami is gonna have Butler and probably
Mhm.
Dragic back. There's nobody on the injury report tonight. Harrell is questionable, but
Yeah.
um, they have most of their guys still.
So when you're looking at the Celtics, they're right at 500 in the East. Although I think Tatum dropped like 53 the other night, and he's just been kind of on a tear. So, and we do tend to struggle with teams that we don't play that often.
And they're longer. Again, Jaylen Brown and Tatum, like those
Good
guys,
point.
they have to scare you. They don't have any bigs that really scare you. I mean,
No,
Robert Williams has been
fine.
great. He's a
Yes.
hustle guy, but again, you don't feel too worried about it. But again, it's the Kawhi George challenge of the wings and being able to slow down these bigger guys when they're coming down the court, and that just worries me with guys like Norman Powell trying to be out there and guarding
Yeah.
Tatum. I don't know. It's
Yeah.
a worry.
It's going to be interesting to see. I think I okay. So when we talk about the 3 guard lineup, is that just locked in for you for the rest of the year, no matter what the matchup is, or do you honestly think we gotta play some DJ or Nas at the 3?
I want DJ Moore. I don't want Powell on the starting unit. I want Powell to get a lot of minutes. I want him to be used heavily in that second unit, and I don't mind if he's out there playing stretches as a small forward when Jones gets his rest.
Sure.
I'm fine with that if he's playing with Damon TJ in spurts, but I think the long run, I prefer to have Jones because we need more defense and length on that
Length.
floor than what we have with Powell. He's a good defender. He's a hustle guy. He's got a good wingspan for a 6'3" guard. To me, he's the ideal shooting guard for this team. But whatever, he's not. He's playing small forward. I don't like the 3 guard lineup. I think we're going to continue to struggle against bigger teams. Teams with length are just kicking our butts right now because you don't have the recovery and the length to make up for CJ and Dame's lack of defense. You just don't have it. So
Yep.
I think Stott sticks with it. I think he's already come out publicly and said we're playing the best players on the team. He thinks that Powell's better than Jones. Probably is overall. So that's what they're gonna do. I don't like it, but it seems to be what they're gonna end up rolling with.
Yeah, and you had a really good point that I'd like to circle back to earlier. You said Dame's playmaking and assists are up. They really are. He's having a career year as a point guard. I think that that's something that we need to keep an eye on and monitor over the next month is how much is Dame facilitating for others and getting other people involved. I think if Dame is averaging 8 to 12 assists or getting 8 to 12 assists in a game, I think we're going to be really hard to beat. because the Blazers are I think we're the lowest assisting team in the league offensively. So you got to sit here. I mean, I know people want to knock everybody on this team, but Dame has stepped up in a different way this year, and he's bringing a different element. So I think it's worth highlighting. And if he and Powell and CJ do have just a ridiculous shooting night, there's not very many teams that are going to be able to keep up with us offensively. And I think that we haven't really seen that yet. I do think that that is going to happen at some point. It's going to wow everybody against a really good team. But I don't know, man. I think people just need to be patient, let them continue to tweak a little bit, and let's see what we have here over the next couple of weeks as we play good teams.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it still worries me that you're going to be a shoot first team. A lot of thing with the defense that people don't seem to talk about is it's hard to play and get back and get set on defense after a missed shot. And when you're putting up the most 3-pointers that you've ever put up as a team, and you, even if you're hitting enough of them, you're not going to typically get hit more than 45%, 40%.
Mhm.
And so that's a lot of misses. That's a lot of long misses, a lot of long rebounds, which allows teams to start pushing that pace right back down the floor. And that's been a killer. And I mean, I don't want to touch too much on it right now, but I would, urge fans to keep an eye on that. There's a reason that our defense is bad. It's not just, I mean, why hasn't our defense been this bad with Stotts the entire tenure of his run? There's other things that come into play that people don't tend to look at. I think the 3-point shooting is a problem. I like that we're shooting threes. I think it's great that we have a lot of shooters. We also outscored Milwaukee by 27 points in the 3-point line and got whooped. It's fine and dandy. But when you're shooting a lot of threes and you're missing a lot of threes or you're not hot, that just sets the other team up to run down and do whatever they want before you can get set. And you don't have the defenders to make up for that.
Yeah.
It don't matter who you have out there. That's a problem. So
that's a good point. And then another thing fans were calling out this week is you said something earlier about Dame has been kind of letting the refs know about his foul situation for sure. But he's got to start getting back on defense. And same thing with Melo. Melo and Dame are the two worst about not getting back on defense in transition, and then we just get scored on. I totally get that you guys are the offensive guys and you're supposed to be doing that, but you got to do your job on defense and get your butts back down there because we get a lot of 3v2s or 3v1s in transition from those long rebounds that are just frustrating.
Yeah, for sure. So
okay,
all
man,
good things
what else
to watch
you got?
for. Well, I want to do let's do the Blazing New Trails Player of the Week. It's a small one this week. Got some stuff to keep an eye on out there with some different players that are making moves and playing around. But I was just kind of a shout out again to another guy that helped us out a lot last year. Played a decent amount of time with us, switched back and forth. But Jalen Horde, Jalen Horde got signed to the just on a temporary basis to the Oklahoma City Thunder again. We saw what that did for Moses Brown. He obviously had a big run. Was there working through some injuries. So his hats off to him. It's just cool to let people know where these old Blazers are at right now. So he's playing right there with Oklahoma City. To be honest with you, I haven't really paid attention to his stats too much. I wanted to come in,
but he's playing.
But he's playing. It's just so cool to see that he's still getting some run out of the G League and getting put onto that team. So hats off to him. It's always fun to see these guys getting opportunities with other teams when they were there for us in our time of need. I do think we'll have some interesting ones coming up here. I'm starting to monitor some of the old Blazers, and there's definitely some stuff going on out there that's going to be interesting for people to see on some other teams as they integrate themselves. And obviously, Gary Trent Jr. just got his career high the other night, and hats off to him. Yeah, well,
that dude. So first of all, we don't have to talk about it for very long, but I just want to. He come out and said that he finally feels like appreciated or wanted for the first time in his career. I got some bad taste in my mouth from Gary Trent. First of all, we offered him a contract. It wasn't good enough. So don't sit here and say Portland didn't appreciate you. We tried to extend him. He bet on himself. Great. I understand that he didn't want to stay with the Blazers because he was never going to get a starting spot with Dame and CJ here. So that's fine. But don't sit here and say you didn't feel appreciated because the fans loved Gary Trent in Portland. That was egregious.
We don't know what goes on behind closed doors either. We have no idea what's going on out there. That's one thing to come out and you have a bunch of big games like this and you start playing good for Toronto and it's now you're the man and it's easy to be I don't think it was meant as a bad thing necessarily. So. I think it was more
pro Toronto.
It was more system and more what he's going to get to do. I think it's he feels like he can start here. Maybe he felt like he should have been starting in Portland even with CJ. I mean, we are starting Powell, who's 6'3", bigger wingspan, sure, but we are starting another small guard at the starting forward position. So maybe he feels like that could have been me. But you're absolutely right. I mean, we weren't going to keep him. We weren't going to be able to pay him. Like, people that think that we could have, I mean, we could have paid him, but it would have been a terrible decision to do so. I don't care how good he is. He's not going to get that same run in Portland and the same opportunities. So he's not going to put up the same scoring. He had those opportunities and he wasn't doing it because, like you said, James TJ numero uno. I mean, Lowry doesn't score much for Toronto anymore. And Van Fleet, I'm sure he doesn't mind passing that off. And another thing with Gary is he's still hitting 6-7 threes. They're using him as a shooter. And when shooters are on, they're going to put up a lot of points. And it's going to look great. And fans, take it out of context. Oh, my gosh, he's so good. Why did we trade him? Why did we trade him? You traded him because you got a better player overall, and Norman Powell that fits our system a little bit better. Yeah. And you're not going to keep him anyway, so you might as well go out and get a guy like that. Happy for Trent. Glad he's doing well. I mean, of course, we're happy for him, but people are funny when they overreact about that kind of stuff and his comments and everything. But
I'm not worried about it, but I mean, I'm glad to see him get success, and Toronto should re-up him, and they should sign him for a long-term deal, man. He looks like he fits great in that system, and he looks like him and Van Vliet could be a nasty backcourt after Lowry leaves, because I think Lowry's gone this year in free agency, and they'll have a young core that they can build with. I hope Gary Trent does great. He's been fantastic, 44 points the other night. The other one is LaMarcus has been playing big minutes for the Nets, and he's kind of embracing sort of a playmaking 5 role, like a short role guy. So maybe you could see LaMarcus get a title. And I mean, if anybody's going to win one, I hate to see the method that he had to go to get one, but I think LaMarcus deserves a ring because he was such a great Blazer for the first 8 years or whatever of his career. So.
Yeah. I mean, he came out today or yesterday and said, I can't believe I looked at a film and I can't believe how bad I was defensively. So I think he's been stepping it up there. Yeah. I mean, sure, it's one thing. It's easy to go out there and do that when you have the kind of guys you have around you and that type of team. You can be a little more lax and you can play a little different defense and get away with a lot more than you probably could otherwise. But yeah, it's cool to see a bunch of guys that have been on the team doing well out there right now. So yeah, happy for them.
All right, man. Well, let's go 500 this week. Come on, guys. Let's go over 500. Let's go 2-1. I'd be happy with that.
A lot of tough games. I mean, a lot of size. Jimmy Butler's always we barely skidded away from Miami last time, and they didn't have Dragic and Jimmy Butler. So I hate my little European dragon out there. Dragic's one of my favorite players, so I'm looking forward to that. Yeah, we'll have a lot to talk about. I mean,
we will.
I think it sucks that we lost 2 games against 2 of the continuing teams in the West and didn't look good in either of them because I think fans are really just
bummed out,
uneasy right now. They're uneasy. They just don't like what they're seeing. It's easy to go back to stats. It's easy to blame certain players. I mean, it's all over the place right now. We need a good week to get everybody to chill out and calm back down. So here's hoping for that for sure.
Let's do it. And then for anyone who isn't already, please like and subscribe. It really helps the channel. We're working really hard on getting the audio only for the Spotify, Apple users. We'll have that up this week for sure, I promise. We're going to dial it in. It's been a little harder. I reached out to a couple other YouTube channels and said, how do you guys do Spotify? And it's been a little harder than I thought, but we want to get a good, consistent method for you guys to listen. Like and subscribe, and then share if you can with your friends. If you know Blazer fans that are looking for other podcasts, don't be afraid to throw us out there or tag us and stuff. So we appreciate it.
Yeah. For sure. Any feedback is welcome. We don't focus too much on specific numbers and stats because this is more for the casual fan. We focus on that just to keep people in the loop with what's going on the team that don't get to watch as often as they'd like or what have you. But we're always willing to do some more research and put up different numbers if you guys want to see that. That's totally fine. Any feedback that you have for us, again, we appreciate it. We're working on having some other guests on here, some people we've reached out to that sounds like we'll hopefully have some other big names for you guys to get onto the show here soon. So keep following us and keep up to date with everything we're doing. We appreciate it.
We appreciate it. Rip City Real Talk. We out.
Out.